The Future of Software Engineering with Scott Hanselman.
The Azure and DevOps podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using the latest in .NET, Azure, AI, and DevOps. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. The show is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm. Find them at www.clearmeasure.com. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. Quick announcement, if you haven't seen it, the podcast has opened up the YouTube channel. So as well as all the podcast channels, you can also go to YouTube and get the video format. So please do that. My guest today on the show is Scott Hanselman. And he is a teacher at heart. He speaks all over wherever people will listen. He's written code that you probably have used, and he's been blogging and coding and podcasting a long time. He codes and writes and speaks, empowers, promotes, braids, learns, listens, and usually not in that order. And he's a vice president at Microsoft in his day job, focusing on the developer community. And you can find him on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, Mastodon, everywhere. And his Hanselman podcast has surpassed 1,000 episodes, and his Azure Friday show is going strong. And you can connect with him at hanselman.com and also see episode 280, where we were talking about AI and semantic kernel. But Scott, I'd like to welcome you back to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm surviving. How are you?
Fantastic, fantastic. Probably all of the listeners of the show, or most of them, have kind of heard you speak before and are familiar because you've done so much. Just I'll classify it as teaching. But for maybe the nugget who are just getting to know you, if I were to kind of back you up in your career, is there one or a few things that keeps you jazzed up about programming?
That's a tough one. I mean, I think everyone gets a little burned out sometimes and everyone gets a little tired. I think that if it's making stuff for delight's sake is my number one thing. So if I'm sad or I'm down, I just make something delightful. Couple of weeks ago, a buddy of mine released his jazz album, and he's a kind of a famous jazz musician here in Portland. So he invited me to his listening party, and I don't know anything about music, and I didn't know what kind of gift to give him. So, but I make these vases on my 3D printer. So I thought it would be cool to take the music from one of his jazz performances and then take the waveform of it and then wrap it around the vase. So instead of a vase that was done in a straight circle, it would be a curved amplitude frequency wrapped version of a vase, so that the vase would be jazz. But I didn't know how to do that. But you can see I can kind of explain it, but I couldn't get it. I couldn't do the math. And I also only had 6 hours to do it. So I did GitHub Copilot CLI, and I know enough to be dangerous. I mean, I 80% of what I needed to know. So I wrote an app that took the wave file, made the waveform, generated the STL that generated the G code. So I basically generated with Python a vase, and that had nothing to do with business or work or anything, but it was just a very delightful Saturday afternoon.
Yeah,
and that kind of like, if you imagine like Flappy Bird, if you kind of get down and then you make something cool and then you're like happy again for a couple of weeks.
Right.
So I kind of make random crap like that, and it just kind of zhuzhes me up a bit for the next week.
That's awesome.
That's a long answer, but that's the truth.
Well,
anyway, he liked the vase.
That's great. Yeah, that's really cool. The concept of AI coding, music, and then 3D printing. That's pretty fun. That's pretty fun. I think there's so many areas where if we know one type of code or configuration, and now syntax is less and less of a barrier because we can just prompt and unlock whatever the syntax we don't have memorized.
Right. The syntax, though, like if you know what you're doing, like I could visualize the pipeline of what I wanted to do. Like
Mhm.
STL files are text, and G code, which is what the actual like what the code that tells the 3D printer to move the printer head and things like that. Like this is all text. So this was a text transformation kind of a exercise of sorts.
Yeah.
And I understand wave files enough to be dangerous. So this was an example of like 80% understanding across, and then the syntax was the only thing standing in my way. If I couldn't express it clearly with intent, which is what, prompting in quotes is, I think that I could have gotten like in trouble quickly, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. So I
Yeah.
think you still got to know that how the pieces fit together. You still have to understand that you're playing Lego and then they snap together a certain way.
Right.
But if you don't know what you're doing, and I've gotten like in the deep end sometimes, you're going to get random output and you're not going to be able to pull it back. And that's, I think, the trick. So software engineering is going to be very intentional right now. I think too many people think they can vibe their way into production,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I don't think you can.
Well, technology has expanded and grown so much, and every new wave of technology promises something, and the question is, okay, is something fundamentally changing, or are we just getting some more transistors in the CPU and it's incremental? I want to highlight you recently did a talk at TEDx Portland, and you called it "Tech Promised Everything, Did It Deliver?" I want to ask you about that, not to read you the talk, but what was in your brain where you thought, hey, people need to hear this?
Well, that one's complicated. They had invited me to TED a couple of times, and I didn't want to go. So I think I said no thank you a couple of years and just kind of like, because I wanted to make space for other people. But then when I turned 50, I started thinking about all of the promise of early tech in the 80s and the 90s. And people know that I'm into retro, nostalgia type programming. And I played with an Altair at Ignite, and I've got a Commodore 64, and I support the new Commodore that just came out. You can buy a Commodore 64 now at Commodore.com. And right now, there's just so much slop out there that's not fun. It's not delightful, and it doesn't even solve a business problem. That I wanted to talk about that. So yeah, the talk was basically a little bit of a meandering nostalgia conversation about my 5th grade teacher and how she enabled me with a Commodore 64 and an Apple II, and that I keep trying to bring that kind of energy into everything that I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you kind of had mentioned on your making of the Vaz, use Copilot CLI, and the file formats were text, and everybody's asking the question. Some people make these futuristic things. Oh, AI is going to write all the code, and programmers are just going to review. And there's all kinds of people talking about, and then others saying, oh, it's not going to happen. And then some pundits saying, hey, invest in us. We're going to create AGI in 2 years. And now the people are saying, well, I don't know if that's ever going to happen. So pulling way back just into our world of software engineering, and of course the programmers listening to this podcast are thinking, is my career changing? How is it changing? What's going to be different? I mean, you're inside of a company that is building tools that
Yeah.
an industry of programmers is using to make software. So what do you see clearly, and what do you think is still fuzzy about the future of how we're going to make software as programmers?
I think it's useful to talk to people who've been around for a very, very long time. And this is another couple of layers on top of the stack. And, I started writing C when Hello World was 90 lines of code.
Mm-hmm.
And then Visual Basic came out, and people would go file new project, and they drag a button onto a form, and they lost their minds because it was like, this is too easy, right? It's now one line, button _ click.
Mm-hmm.
Unacceptable. They hid the entire message pump. The layers of abstraction that get hidden from you right now are high.
Mm-hmm.
But being a programmer is all about expressing one's intent and expressing it with clarity and having it be aligned with some particular goal. The stack is very, very, very deep right now. And if you think that GPTs, generative pre-trained transformers, are just a prose compiler where you can just yap for a paragraph and then something exactly what you want pops out, you are right to a point for the things that are well understood, right? Because it's the statistical model of what is well understood. So for things like text boxes over data, it's quite reliable.
Mm-hmm.
For example, for my podcast, I had a back end that was just 2 JSON files. So like managing the Hanselman podcast was me opening Azure Storage Explorer and editing a text file and then uploading it again. And I never got around to writing an admin backend because it's it's annoying, but it's not annoying enough to spend a week writing an admin backend.
Right.
But it was very well understood. Like it was a JSON file, and then I had these images. So I had headshot management, I had advertiser management, I had the sites and the sponsors and the linkage between them. So it was a couple of files and some Azure storage. It was like all the Legos were on the ground and they just needed to be put together. So I wrote a specification. I actually dictated it with my voice, and I wrote it in Markdown, and I fed that in. And I didn't try to one-shot the app. I didn't try to get it to do it right the first try. It's a conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. It's just a new kind of programming. And now I have an administrative backend, and it's very, very good. And, it has security updates sometimes, and I run through it, and I add more unit tests and stuff. But like the practice of the running of it is not changed. So if you think about this pie chart that is writing software and then the operational side, which is the running of the software, keeping it running, I think that we're just going to see the writing part get slightly smaller, and then the ops side will become more of what we do until eventually we have like site reliability engineering agents like SRE agent that will help us keep those tasks to a minimum. But this is all just about making the toil and the tedium less.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you've got people like the gentleman that wrote File Pilot. Have you seen this new Windows Explorer replacement?
File Pilot? No, I'm going to look it up.
FilePilot.tech. .tech is the top level domain.
Mm-hmm.
This is a 2.3 megabyte Windows File Explorer. It's written entirely in C by one gentleman. It's 10 C files and a couple of lines of C++. It's got virtually no external linkages, and it's done entirely bespoke. Now, he uses AI to discuss the app with himself for like brainstorming and reading docs, but this app is written entirely, bespoke. So yeah, text boxes over data, stupid, like little simple problems that are tedious. Yeah, why not? But, doing bespoke things, I think there's still a huge value in that. I just think that the industry is going to have to absorb that teach everyone to code doesn't necessarily mean teach everyone the science of software engineering. There's going to be people prompting business apps, and that's okay. And those people are different than the vase makers and then the gentleman that wrote File Pilot or people like them.
Yeah. So you built your admin app, in the last 6 months? Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So
that's a good point. I think I started in March.
Because I
used Claude at the time.
I just try to remember the big things that have happened. Like in 2022, ChatGPT comes out, blows everybody's mind, and then Cursor is getting traction at the end of 2024, and then in May of 25 is when Copilot agent mode came to Visual Studio, where now multi-file editing is real at the Build conference, and so. For .NET developers, it's a super recent thing to have agent actually write files and create files and all that. And so, you've done one of these projects, and a lot of people are thinking, okay, well, what does that look like? Now. What does that flow look like? How does that work?
Well, so let me think about an example. So I made Okay, so Mac has this new feature coming out for Tahoe, which is like 26.2, I think, which is a ring light that they use. They have a really bright, high nit HDR screen, so they draw a ring light, just like the ring light that I'm using here, on the screen to use the high nit, the high brightness, the high lumens of the screen to illuminate yourself. And it's very pretty. It's very and they got like AI that like brightens it depending on where your face is. It's a whole thing. But effectively, they've drawn a square on the screen. But it's a really cool looking ring light. So I'm like, I want one of those. That can't be hard. So I decide to vibe it. And I want to do it in .NET 10 and WPF. So on its face, you open up Visual Studio Code, or in my case, GitHub Copilot CLI, because I kind of like to drive stick shift.
Mm-hmm.
And I dictated for about 2 or 3 paragraphs what I was trying to do, the intent of what I was trying to do, that I was going to use .NET 10, I was going to use WPF. And then I got this kind of like frame, like imagine a white picture frame around the outside of your window.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not complicated. I'm sure we can all visualize it. And I'm sure that any .NET programmer who's listening could probably do this without AI in, 20 minutes. You can imagine the XAML. You have to think about the size of the screen, the margins, and you draw yourself thing. But then you start getting into like, what would it actually look to be a piece of shipping software? How would that be? How much more nuance is there than I put a white thing up on the screen? Well, then it's like, does it look like a ring light? Does it have that soft glow? Does it have a feathering effect? What if you move your mouse over it? Can you see through it? Is it always on top? Is it transparent or not?
Mm-hmm.
What about 4K monitors? What about moving between monitors? What about multiple monitors? What about DPI changes? What if someone unplugs their monitor or plugs in their laptop while the thing is on? Like, you can start imagining how complicated it is. Now you want AI to like be able to, not AI, but like machine learning, like face tracking. So if you put your face over here, it brightens. And if you put your face over there, it like darkens or whatever. Then you've got to have access to the camera, and you've got a face tracking model. But you're also in Teams, so you need read-only shared access to it. Like, things start getting complicated. Then you need to publish it, build it. You want it to work on x64 and ARM.
Mm-hmm.
You need certificates for Defender. A publishing certificate. You want infrastructure around it, and then maybe you want it to auto update. So click once isn't really a thing right now. What's the options?
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, drawing a white frame on the screen is the least of your problems.
Right.
And the problem with being a junior engineer right now, an early in career engineer, is that you don't know what you don't know. And what I think is fun about talking about this stupid light, and I did a TikTok, and it went kind of like low key viral, and people think it's stupid. And it's like, I never claimed it wasn't stupid, right? It's delightful. There's a difference. I did it as an exercise, and it is an interesting exercise. Draw a square, it's a useful square, on the screen, and then ship it. And now I've got documentation. I have more documentation generated than I have code.
Yeah.
I've got this great new NuGet package called Updatem that is effectively like a replacement for Squirrel or for Click Once, so it auto updates. I got to learn all about Azure Trusted certificates. So I get a free code signing, not a free, but a $10 a month code signing certificate in Azure. I got to learn how GitHub Actions plugs into Azure to auto update the thing. So I could right now go and make a change, do it on a different branch, push it up, merge it over to main, run a bunch of tests, publish it, and have that thing out in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And do it entirely with my voice. Right? And my hands hurt. So like, I don't type much anymore. That's freaking cool. That's fun. And it means that all of the tedium that I have been doing for the last 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
build servers and the parts that are understood, they're handled. However, in the example that I'm giving, I had to know all those things exist.
Yes.
The question is, how does the next generation of young people learn that stuff? And how do we shepherd them to learn these things? Because I don't want to hide that stuff. If there's one philosophy of software engineering, which is like, well, we'll hide all of it. like Vercel or something like that, where it's just like, it's all done. The building is hidden behind, just check it in, it'll just work.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's I want to, like I said, drive stick shift. I want to be able to see how the engine moves. That's kind of my philosophy.
Well, I want to ask you about your hands hurting and voice, but when you're describing this manner of making the app and then making it ship ready, I was thinking of the relationship between design and build. For the longest time, we had some discussions and we spent some time making design decisions and thinking, how should it be? What do we want it to do? And then the actual building of it took more time than making that design decision. And now it seems like those relationships are materially changing. Now, in some instances, if you're in a team setting, standing around a whiteboard or just having the conversations, enumerating what's in scope, what's out of scope, what do we want it to do, when it switches monitors, let's talk through that. That could take more time now than making the code satisfy what we've decided it needs to do. It seems like that's fundamentally shifting.
That's a very interesting perspective, and I think you've kind of hit on something, which is we will be able to make software faster than we can consume it or consider it. We're finding code reviews take longer than the writing of the code because humans have to sit down and just sit in it and think about it. Like, this is a stupid analogy, but imagine a world where you can boil water instantly, but you still need to steep the tea.
Right.
Right. So like, I gotta just think about it. Give me just a second, Jeffrey. Like, I gotta think about the problem set here. Well, I already wrote the code like that. It's changing the amount of time that is spent on stuff. You're absolutely right. So with the vase, rather than getting it right in the first time, I could do 2 or 3 vases. And I spent more time with the Edge Light. It's called Windows Edge Light. It's up on my GitHub. I spent more time once I had made it, getting the inner loop and the outer loop. So the developer's inner loop is me making a change and then seeing a result. And then the outer loop is putting a version out there. And because I have auto updating, I think I have like 15 or 16 versions. I'm on like version 1.11 or something like that right now. So once I had the infrastructure such that I could, move fast, people were putting in PRs, people were making suggestions. I was like, oh, that's a great idea. We should do that. Da-da-da-da-da. Right. That was the fun part, which gets back to the point about toil. The whole point is to make it less toil and more fun. And it was delightfully fun to make. I want to make sure I don't have any pull. Oh, I have pull requests.
You have a pull request.
Oh my God. I totally forgot. I haven't looked at this in a week. Okay. So fully support HDR. I have a new one. Someone sent me one.
And whether or not they prompted the pull request or actually hand tweaked a line, doesn't matter. But now you've got a pull request and an easy way for people to contribute.
Oh yeah, this is Michelle from Italy. Okay, this is great. They made a model view model refactoring. How fun is that?
Nice. Now you mentioned your hands hurting and using your voice, and of course, I learned how to properly type when I was in 7th grade in the late 80s, but my kids have not learned to properly type. And then the question is like, well, what typing is necessary and what does input mean in decades to come? So what was your process like? What have you found that just kind of flows even right now?
So I use Windows H, which is built into Windows. You can just press Windows H and it'll pop up a dictation thing. So everyone has this. No one ever presses that, but it's dictation. I like that feature because the model that Windows uses has both an explicit and implicit punctuation feature. So I like to use I'd like to say punctuation explicitly because I like to know where the commas are. So I would say something like colon, that's interesting, comma, let's look more into that, exclamation point. But more recently, I've been playing with a new tool called Handy, which is at handy.computer, not .com, but .computer. And Handy does not send any transcription stuff to the cloud. Everything is entirely local. and it is using, it does like silence removal, and it uses either the whisper models or the parakeet models. And it works on, Windows, Mac, and Linux, but it also will use your GPU. And that one I found to be extremely good. So I have both of those open, and I changed it so I have Windows H for Windows dictation and Control Shift H for
Handy.
Handy. And the NVIDIA Parakeet transcription one is extremely good. It's quite small, runs locally, runs on my NVIDIA GPU. I use that for all my Teams messages, all my Outlook. And I would argue that and this is an opinion, but I would argue I am faster than pretty much anyone can type. I think I'm effectively speaking at like 150 words a minute, which would be fast typing.
Yeah.
And I try to be explicit. I don't try to, I try not to say, even though I just tripped over my own tongue there.
Right.
I'm able to go pretty darn fast. So when I'm talking to people, they're like, how are you typing so fast? Dictation.
Right.
And it's great for coding. It's great for coding.
A year ago, I was finishing my latest book, and I was using Crisp, and I was trying out some other things, just exploring, because for certain sections and paragraphs, I thought, okay, I know exactly what I want to say. How fast can I say it? Can I just speak it and have it be transcribed? And now, especially with the local LLMs, which are kind of small language models, actually, it looks like it's becoming ubiquitous.
Speaking, like dictation?
Just speaking to the computer.
I think that we've got models now that are clean enough from, Alexa to Siri to whatever. Voice is pretty darn reliable. The challenge is, of course, that people write in a different style than they speak. So you can get an overly conversational style. So it's not a replacement for editing after the fact. So I'll yap an email, but then I'll go and tighten it up with typing.
So, with software, I think a good question to ask, and I don't know the answer to this question, is there a new paradigm for user interface for our software applications? For the longest time, we've thought of, there's a screen, there's a button, there's a text box, there's a drop down, and now with so many things where we just pop up Copilot, or we type in a Google search, and whether you dictate it or type it, it's more like free form and chat response. And what do you think? Is it going to change how we design user interfaces for the software that we build?
I would like people to spend time thinking about sketching. Like, remember, like iPads, like in tablet PCs, got touch working. I still think there's a lot to be said for the pen. Like right now, I've got 3 4K monitors, and then in front of me, right down here below, I've got a little 10-inch, like, these little $80 USB-C monitors.
Is a pen monitor?
And it's touch, right? So I can touch it. But I've also got a collection of styluses. These are Surface ones. This is a Remarkable, and this is kind of there's a style. I forgot the name of it. There's an actual generic standard for like floatable pens that have erasers and stuff. So, for example, this is my Remarkable e-ink, and then I'm not sure where it is. I'm selling an Onyx Books, Boox, and I lost the stylus, but then I discovered that there's a standard for being able to draw on screens. So I just bought a generic replacement, and it's cool to be able to just like do a signature like on my desktop using that little screen. If I could scribble on the back of a napkin a user interface and then have that go into Figma, that'd be really cool. So I think there's value in exploring what they call multimodal stuff. Like, look at this picture. You hold it up, like just like Star Trek. That's what we want. I don't want it to do everything for me. I want it to collaborate. Hey, I had an idea at Red Robin earlier. Here, look at that. Oh, okay. Puts it up on the screen. Cool. A little bit more blue. Push it over to the side. Okay, let me draw here. So I'm talking, I'm showing it pictures, and I'm using a pen all at the same time.
Right. Well, and if if figuring out what you want the software to be is really where the lion's share of the time is going to be spent. And kind of like 3D printing, you're not hand chiseling to make this object. You're just, oh, I got the design. Let me press a button on a computer and let me come back and it'll be done. Then that kind of changes our flow.
It would change our flow a lot, and I just think that we need to think more thoughtfully about it, about what we want it to be.
Yeah.
Also, there's too many things to talk to in my house between Siri and Alexa and Copilot, and no like single hotkey for it. So I'm looking forward to a little bit of more. I don't know. Like I don't want one company to support it all, but I like the idea of having the same local yapping thing. I don't know what I would call it. Local agent. But like right now, I've got Claude, I've got Copilot, I've got Gemini, I've got Siri, I've got Alexa, and they're all, for me, they can all be talked to.
Right.
I just think we need to reconcile all of that, because right now on Star Trek, you kind of go computer,
Sure.
and with our stuff,
computer.
it's you're talking to a big giant company. You're talking to some billionaire, and I don't like that.
Yeah. So you had brought up the plight of the junior developer who doesn't know what he doesn't know, and syntax is no longer the obstacle. It's just figuring out what's possible or what's right. And you also mentioned your application. You can do the digital signing. You can publish it. Everything's set up with GitHub Actions, or you can absorb pull requests. And it seems like with this era of AI coding tools, the era where, oh, let me Google for that, or let me look at Stack Overflow to find some syntax, or how do I make it do what's in my brain? That's kind of shrunk down to almost nothing, because you can just prompt it right there in your IDE, and then boom, there's some probably workable code. But the architecture of the development environment holistically, the junior developer is thinking, well, it works on my box, and that's kind of the world. But where you understand, well, wait a minute, it doesn't matter what the software does. I need a version control repository set up, and I'm going to do branching a certain way, and I need to the concept of a build. I need to do that thing. Oh, do we need some automated tests? How do those work? Oh, we're going to deploy it to somewhere that's not production.
That's exactly
what does that mean?
About.
And the digital signing, what does that mean? The architecture of how the heck you put together the system by which you could write a line of code.
And that is software engineering, right? So when I was listing out all the stuff I had to think about that had nothing to do with drawing a square on the screen.
Yes.
Right. It's all the administrivia. The question is, will that administrivia be abstracted away? And should it be abstracted away?
Well,
and like you haven't written assembler in a while, I assume.
Never.
Right.
I've looked at it in a textbook.
Right. But you don't write a lot of assembler because it's been largely extracted away. So that's the challenge, right? Like some people though write assembler every day because it's exactly the right layer of abstraction.
Yeah.
So it kind of all depends. But I think I do mourn the craftsmanship of it. Yeah. But I think a good example would be if you think of coding as poetry and you don't like the idea of ChatGPT generating a poem for you, then you will also not like it generating your code for you. But if some of your stuff is poetry and some of it's not.
Yeah, right. Well, like your story, I like playing the game Imposter with my family when we were around the dinner table, and there's this website with the Imposter game. You pass it around, and each one gets assigned the word. But that website has cropped up a whole lot of ads over time. And now you have to wade through the ads to find out the button to start the game. And then I said, kids, and they really don't have a love for programming, to my chagrin, but I said, do you guys want to just write the code and we can build this game for ourselves and it won't have ads? And they're like, oh, that'll take too long. I said, I bet it won't. And so with them, I literally went through the exercise of kind of set up the general structure, and then we prompted our way through it, and Blazor WebAssembly threw it up on Azure Static Sites, and boom, we have an ad-free Imposter game.
Exactly. Yep. But that's understood because imposter's a well understood game, and it's not hard.
It's not hard.
Like
Right.
you can vibe a Pac-Man clone very, very quickly.
Right. And my kids, who no interest in going through the toil of learning syntax to get to that point where they could create some software that works, they saw the ability to create some software that had the nuances of how they wanted it to work without going through the toil of learning syntax.
Right.
So that was interesting.
It'd be interesting though if they could create a game that was not
prior art.
There you go. Well said. Not prior art.
Yeah, absolutely. You enumerate the rules and all that. So
exactly.
Well, as we kind of close up here, Scott, you've seen multiple decades of the software industry, and so for the programmers who are either just coming into it or questioning, well, how's my career gonna flesh out? What is your prediction of the nature of programming work over the next 5-10 years?
I will still, I could be called a fool in retrospect, but I still stand by the idea that you need to understand how the thing works. I always use this analogy. People are tired of me using it, but it's a good freaking analogy, which is that in a world of self-driving cars, you should still understand that there's an internal combustion engine or a hybrid engine or an electrical engine underneath that. You should still know how to change your tires if you can, and think about when your oil and maintenance has to happen, because otherwise you're going to end up trapped in a self-driving car with, a popped tire and no way to solve it. So like when layers of abstraction continue to be piled on, there's going to be value in the people who know 1 or 2 layers below their comfort zone.
Yeah.
So I think there's value in understanding how the system works.
And at least for some time to come, when we think about what is the source code, what do we put in version control, it's not English prompts right now. It's still C# and other languages.
Well, the version control thing is a tough one. Like you can really get into trouble with Git if you don't understand branching, if you don't understand, like the point of, but this is the other thing, right? I'll offer this in closing: historical context. Like, why does version control exist? Why does the cloud exist? These are all other things that if you know them and you understand them, then you'll understand, like how we got here. Yeah. So I think I would like to teach computer science history.
And all of those were robust industry conversations. Yeah.
100%.
Well, fantastic. Well, Scott, thanks for coming back on the show and having a chat with me about the future of software engineering. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. And until next time, dear listener, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure and DevOps podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Visit our sponsor, ClearMeasure, at www.clearmeasure.com. And on behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.